Welcome to this LookDev tutorial in which we'll build a 3D brick wall. So firstly, what we'll be doing is layering image maps to create more sophisticated color textures. And secondly, we'll be layering and daisy chaining normal map tiles with procedural bump maps to create the illusion of high-res detail compensating for the 2K maps. So how is this constructed? Let's take a look. We have firstly a color map which is tileable. There are lots of websites on the internet that enable you to get hold of these. It's rather dull looking, so we're going to look at how can we change the color within Maya. Secondly, we've got a normal map which simulates the bumpy texture. And thirdly, we've got an ambient occlusion map which simulates the grit in between the stones and can add heightened realism. Before we start, let's just take a look at combining these maps in the Hypershade. So let's take a look at the bump network. Now the main node is the normal map node plugged into the normal camera, and the strength of the effect is here. So if I just pull that down, you'll see straight away it gives this flattened look to the wall. I have, however, plugged in another bump map, and at the moment in the Hypershade we can't see the texture that's plugged into this. This is simplex noise, so to do that, to see it, I need to go into the channel box, click on the input, and then add it here in the Hypershade, and now we can see simplex noise. And I've added this to allow us a more close-up reading of the brick texture, so that it allows us to bring the camera up close. You can animate this effect, as we'll see. So here we've got a close-up of the bricks, and I'll just turn up the normal strength a little. There we go. And we can see a kind of grainy, sandy effect, and this is as a result of the simplex noise. Now I'll just turn that off, and now you can see the limitations of the 2K normal map texture. This texture is a good texture, but there's a problem in bringing the camera up close. It starts to pixelate and look rather blurry. What I'm doing with this bump is compensating for that, creating this sandy, gritty looking texture on the bricks. Simplex noise is called a 2D texture, but don't let that confuse you. You can still use it to create a 3D effect. Also plugged in to this brick wall object material, we have the bricks color, and what I've done is I've added a color correct node which allows you to do a few things you could normally do in Photoshop. So for example, you can change the color of the bricks, and here I'm moving the hue shift channel controller. I can ramp up the saturation of the bricks. Of course, you don't want to do that too much. And now we've got a kind of monochrome, except you are seeing some color, and the reason for that is because I've got a rust texture layered on top of it to add complexity to the image. So here's the rust image, and it's plugged into another color correct node, and if I turn up the saturation on that, you'll see it pulling through of course we wouldn't want to overdo the saturation again, and I'll turn up the bricks saturation to 1, and then I'll demonstrate the layer node here. So both of these bricks and rust are plugged into a layer node, and you can see layer 1 here, which is the bricks sitting over the layer 2, and here I've activated overlay on the rust to give it a bit more punch, but you have to keep the mix pretty low. So if I turn up the mix, you can see the rust really quite exaggeratedly showing on the bricks texture. So I'm going to pull that down. If I turn up the mix on the bricks, you'll see they are now dominating the effect. We've also got an ambient occlusion map, and this simulates the grit between the bricks, and this is also layered, and this is plugged in to third channel, so I'll show you how to do that later on. If I turn it up, you can see the result. It adds more grit and gives a more realistic effect. Let's begin at the beginning. So I've got a basic object, a modular wall which has got a Lambert texture on it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply bumps and the simplex noise. So let's right click and assign a new material, shader, AI standard surface, and then click and we'll map this onto our hypershade, and then I'm going to add the bumps. To start with, I'm going to put the normal map shader into this, so I'm going to go to the AI standard surface, down to geometry, bump mapping, click on the checkerboard, go down to file, and then let's click on the file to load up the normal map. So I've loaded that up. Okay, we can see something happening, but it doesn't look too great. Now when you load up your normal map, what you need to do, in fact what I might do to start with, is bring down the specularity and the weight of the, there we go, so we can see that more clearly. Firstly, this is the old Maya bump node. It does have a facility to turn bump into tangent space normals, and now this is beginning to look more realistic, but the problem is when we move the bump depth, nothing happens, so we haven't got much control over that. And what we're going to do is swap this out for an updated Arnold node. So I'm going to go in here, type in normal, the AI normal map. Now note the alpha is plugged into the bump value, but for this new node we need to go from color to input, delete that, and the out value needs to go into the normal camera. And this is looking unusual, it's not quite there yet. Why not? Couple of things. So if we look in the file node, we must turn the color space to raw. This is fine, this is looking better, but the size isn't quite right. Let's go to our place texture node, and I'm going to go in here to repeat UV and change that to 8. We've got a stretchy effect now, change that to 8, and this is looking better. But when we zoom in, what effect have we got? It looks like it's reversed. So if I go back to the normal map node, this does give us more control than the other node we had. Let's click invert Y, and now we can see the brick texture in all its glory, and we can also influence the strength of it here. It's not looking bad. However, our 2K map does look rather pixelated when we move in, although it's not bad for a 2K map. That's pretty impressive. So you can bring the camera up reasonably close. But what I'm going to do is apply a simplex noise layer. So let's create the node. If we go to 2D textures, here is our simplex noise, and I'll bring it down here. And what we want to do is to plug it in here, but we can't do that yet. We have to create a bump node, and we'll go for the AI bump 2D because it's a 2D texture. It will still simulate 3D. It's a little confusing. So to show the daisy chain effect, let's see how this works. So we want the alpha of the simplex noise to plug into the bump map, and then we're going to connect these two together to combine the effect. To do that, we need the connection editor. So if I go to Window of the Hypershade, Connection Editor, and then reload the left, and then reload the right. So we're combining a bump node with a normal node. Can it be done? Let's see. So firstly, we want to look for the message of the output, and we are going to connect it to the normal camera of the second node, and there we are, it's connected. If you don't get this blue bar appearing, don't worry. As long as you've got this, there may be a bug in Maya, but I'm glad to see that the two have connected, and I can close that. And let's see what happens now if I start playing with the simplex noise. Well, firstly I need to look at the bump height, so I'm going to turn this up, and the first thing I'm going to do in simplex noise is turn up the octaves of the effect. This gives a grainier, more detailed look, and you can see it's mapping over the bricks, but it's kind of dominating. So I'm going to take this down, and I'm quite happy with that, I think, but it's still dominating, so I'm going to take it lower. If I turn it off completely, that's our normal. If I add the bump for a close-up shot, you can see the effect, and I can even turn up, can I turn up the octaves even higher to 10? Now you're getting a super subtle sandy effect, but it is a matter of mixing the two together. So just to recap what we've done, we've daisy chained a normal map with a 2D procedural bump map that is a fractal texture. If we look in simplex noise, we will see it's set to fractal, which should give the illusion of infinite detail. Now you can animate this effect. If we go into bump, from a distance you don't need to have the details from a distance necessarily. You can set keyframes here if you wish. Now let's set about creating our color map. So we'll go up here to standard surface and go into base color and click on file. Oh, I must be careful which one it is. Put it at the bottom, which is confusing. So I'll just move these bump nodes out of the way and load up the color JPEG. And that looks a little bit grim. And why is that? If we zoom out, we can see that there's an issue with sizing, because earlier we changed the effect of the normal map. We actually mapped it over 8 times. So I'm going to go into the place 2D and just do the same thing, repeat UV, turn that to 8 and turn that to 8, and now we've got the bricks sitting over the normal map. And what I'm going to do is go back to our standard surface and turn the weight up, and now we can see the bricks texture with the normal texture. I'm now going to add a color correct node, which will allow us to have more flexibility. Saves you having to go into Photoshop, and here we are, AI color correct. So I'll put that out of the way, and so our color needs to go into input, and the output of the color needs to go into base color. And now this means we've got these controls. So for example, hue shift. This obviously depends on what you are intending to plug in. Green bricks don't look too realistic. We've also got contrast. That's too much. You have to be careful with these. Your gamma control looks punchier too. If I just take down the contrast to 1, I've lowered the gamma a bit on that, but the gamma actually should really just stay where it is. Okay, so let's now add our rust texture. We're going to have a texture mapped over this to add realism. Let's click on this, and I'm going to duplicate the nodes, completely edit, duplicate shading network, and substitute the color of the bricks for my rust texture. So I'm going to go up here to find the rust and put that in. And now, how do we have 2 layers plugged into the base color? For this, we need to create an AI layer node, RGB, and so let's put our bricks in layer 1 just to make things clearer. Sorry, rust is in this one. Bricks is in this one. So the bricks color I'll put in input 1, and the rust color will go into input 2. And I'll just sever that for now, so we've got nothing appearing in terms of color. It's just black, and out color now is going into base color. Let's take a look at the layers. I need to enable layer 2, which is the rust, and if I bring down the bricks texture, we can see the rust there, but there's an issue with it because we have basically got, let's see, if we're going to place texture 8, what happens if I change this to 4? And that's added a little bit more variety to it, like that. It looks a little bit blown out, so we have to be careful by going to color correct. Let's just see, is it the gamma? I'll turn that down somewhat, and now we've got less blown out regions, so just be careful with that. I'll go back into our layer node, and now I will turn up the effect of the bricks and pull down the effect of the and you see the rust. I'm turning up the bricks to mix them together. It looks like a really kind of old grainy stained wall. And I could experiment with these Photoshop style controls in here. So our rust average gives quite a nice effect. So quite happy with that. Now one more thing for the color, we have got from our internet download an ambient occlusion map, so I'm going to create yet another layer. Click on that, I'll duplicate that shading network. This one will be the ambient occlusion. So I'm going to load up the ambient occlusion, open, and I must remember to change the repeat UVs is good, that's on 8, that's looking nice. So let's see, what I need to do now is, nope, it doesn't seem to be plugging in. So what I might do, if you do get this happening, I'll just put this aside, I'll park that. Instead what I'll do is I'll go into the layer node, and layer 3 I'm going to click on the checkerboard, create a file, and now I've just moved everything out of the way, moved the bumps out of the way. I've got the ambient occlusion file here, so I'll load up the ambient occlusion in there, and we can see the grit appearing. What I'm going to do is resize it, repeat UV 8, go into our layer node, and if I go down here to mix, I need to pull that mix down somewhat. I'll just pull it up to start with. I'm going to change over to multiply, and if I turn the mix down, you'll see the cement in between the bricks looks pretty white. If I turn the mix up, you'll see the ambient occlusion effect kicking in, and it adds a grittiness to the image. So I'm going to go up here, rearrange graph, which has made things tidier. For some reason it's the normal node that I was going to look at carefully plugged into Simplex Noise. You can see that here. Just to check that everything is set up as normal, this should be the normal image should be set to raw. That's really important. And we have got an object that you can, if you wish, and you can animate this effect. You can bring the camera up close to it because we've simulated gritty, grainy detail on the bricks.